shift gears and we're going to talk about the southbound side. The southbound side is much more complicated, but it is still just simply customs business. So let's talk a little bit about some of this. So on the first side, so step one, know our Incoterms. How are we selling this cargo? A lot of cargo gets sold FCA Laredo. You might see FOB, even though FOB is a marine term. It does get misused. You also see some DAP work where maybe you're not going to take care of the customs work. Samuel's going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. Also on this side is that the importer in Mexico is the one who is going to clear customs. Here in the US and Canada, we have things like non-resident importers. Those do not exist in Mexico, which if they did, I know would make a lot of your lives much easier, ours too. So once you figure out how you're selling this cargo, is your importer allowed to import the items? Do they have a broker? And that's a really big question because it can take, as you see here, up to 7 days to get set up. Because actually when you provide that power of attorney to the broker, you're actually also providing that power of attorney to SAT and to customs and saying, hey, this person is now allowed to file these on my behalf. And as any of you know, dealing with any government agency, they don't quite move at the same pace as private industry. So things can take longer. Sometimes they get a little bit more nitpicky with the certain things other than if you were dealing with just a broker, we wouldn't get that way. From a documentation perspective, we're still back down to that same set of documents. So we get a lot of questions on, well, do I still need a commercial invoice? Do I still need? Yes, the documentation that you need to clear customs in the United States is pretty much the same documentation you need to clear customs in any country, let alone Mexico, but we can go China, Germany, Brazil. So as we go through this, remember, anytime you think that, well, what documents do you normally produce? Those are the same ones. Obviously, NAFTA information gets a little bit different. And does your product actually qualify or not? So, sorry, we have a lot of questions coming in. I needed to move them for a second. So once we know that your Mexican broker is set up, once we know that your Mexican importer has that broker, we're ready to ship goods to the border. I say that because with that time, what we do is we see a lot of people ship cargo early, and then it ends up getting stuck at someone's warehouse or a trucking terminal for a long time. That can cause additional storage, it can cause damage, it can cause lost freight. So make sure that you have some of this information done on the front end. Once we have all of this done, and this is before the product's already shipped, right? We need to know what our documents are, what our Incoterms are, and then is our potential customer in Mexico, are they set up to be an importer, and do they have a broker in place? And if the answer is no to either one of those questions, don't ship the cargo. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot more steps that we need to take to make sure that they can get cargo into Mexico, or else we're going to get stuck again. We do have a question on what is that whole setting up process. I'll let Samuel go into that here in a second once we kind of finish up the process side of this, so you guys can get a little bit more in depth into what that process looks like. So from there, so let's say all of this happens, cargo basically makes it to Laredo. So let's say it makes it to Scarborough International in Laredo, Texas, right? It makes it to my warehouse down there. So what happens next? I always kind of joke that sometimes Laredo feels like the black hole of freight, right? You ship freight down there, it goes to Laredo, and you have no idea what's going to happen next. So what is going on at that process is that because the Mexican broker takes on the liability, is we're going to take that stuff off of the truck. Now, not in all instances, but let's just go with the norm here. We're going to take that cargo off the truck. We're going to inspect that cargo. We're going to make sure that if you said you sent 100 pieces, that we have 100 pieces or 100 boxes that are getting ready to go. because unlike in the US where you're innocent until proven guilty, in Mexico it's somewhat flip-flopped and you are guilty until proven innocent. So we do a lot of checking on the front end to make sure that that cargo crosses and we don't run into issues should that cargo go up for exam or something along those lines. Once we have gone through that process, a few things to do to help out your broker. If you have tariff numbers, add them. Any item that's going to Mexico that has identifying features on it, such as serial numbers, add those to your commercial invoice or your packing list. That's a big deal because we have to report those. So if you ship down, 100 computers and they all have serial numbers on them, if you don't tell me, you're going to pay for someone to go look and find each serial number that comes off those items. Mexico wants to know so they can identify unique items. So that's a big deal, and it's something that can really help out your broker and keep your costs down if you're willing and able to provide that kind of information, to the broker at the border, so they can go through this preview process and making sure that your cargo is what you say it is. I know that sounds like we don't trust you, and some of this is, we run into the issue where someone says I ship 100, they ship me 90. I can't file that with customs, or I take on a penalty and I take on a fine, not you. So that's where we really get into how difficult it can be to cross the border and why you need somebody that knows what they're doing with your cargo headed down that direction.
Right. In addition there, just to complement the information, the very good information that Adam is explaining us, is that in case that we send something that not match with the documentation that we prepare for the Mexican customs entry, we can be potential seized the part that we did not declare from the merchandise from the importation. So we need to take care, or need to be very careful about what quantity we are sending in order to avoid that seizing from Mexican customs, and in order to be able to penalties, because in Mexico any fine is mostly high, 1,000 or something like that or above. Just a few penalties are cheap, right? But so we're taking care of all the shippers and merchandise and importer records in order to support the compliance process.
Right. So, once that cargo is there, we've gone through those checks. We make sure we know what we're sending in. That's when we're going to assign a drayage company to cross that product. That's when, assuming the product is valued at more than $2,500 per Schedule B, that we're going to go ahead and file the AES transaction. That's also when a lot of the pedimento work from a data entry perspective is being entered, and your importer is being provided previews of that, because unlike in the US, Mexican customs brokers don't front customs duty. The customs duties and taxes are actually deposited to the broker prior to a pedimento ever being filed and your cargo crossing into Mexico. Once again, we transmit the COBE here as well. It kind of goes back to that original conversation about how everything that happens down there goes through the government. That includes all payments. So if I send a bill to somebody, I actually also send that bill to the IRS. And when they pay me for our services, not only do they pay me, they let the government know that they're paying me the amount and how they're doing it. So once we kind of get through that booth, we get through the export lot on the US side. We cross into Mexico. Hopefully we go green light, which means no exam. That cargo will then transit over to someone's terminal there in Nuevo Laredo or another Mexican border town. And from there, we'll then continue on to final destination. So with that, that's kind of